in the Word, our weekly live stream meditation on the Scriptures. Now, currently my focus has been on the Bible Project, a year-long adventure that many of us have been taking through the entire Scriptures. And whether or not you're taking that journey with us, and it's not too late to get on board, send me an email and I'll tell you how you can join our reading group through the YouVersion Bible Project on YouVersion. But send me a link and I'll tell you how you can do that. But whether or not you're doing that along with me, I think it's just really instructive for us to take sort of a deep dive, a long-term look at the whole biblical story. We always benefit from reminding ourselves and immersing ourselves in the great biblical drama found in the Bible. The Scriptures explain for us why we're here in this world, what's gone wrong with the world, though we love it so, and how God has fixed it, and where ultimately this world is headed. It's a story of life, beautiful, broken, rescued, and made new. And today we're beginning the 12th chapter of Exodus as we start to take, if you're doing that study with me, as we start to make our way through this beautiful book of Exodus. Let me just read a little bit and share with you a meditation regarding it. Exodus 12. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron in Egypt, "This month is to be for you the first month of the year. Tell your whole community of Israel that on the 10th day of this month, each person is to take a lamb for his family, one for each household. If any household is too small for a whole lamb, they must share one with their nearest neighbor, having taken into account the number of people there are. You are to determine the amount of lamb needed in accordance with what each person will eat. The animals you choose must be year-old males without defect, and you may take them from sheep or from the goats. Take care of them until the 14th day of the month, when all the members of the community of Israel must slaughter them at twilight. Then they are to take some of the blood and put it on the sides and tops and door frames of the houses where they eat the lambs. That same night they are to eat the meat roasted over the fire along with bitter herbs and bread made without yeast. Do not eat meat raw or boiled in water, but roasted over a fire with the head, legs, and its internal organs. Do not leave any of it until the morning. If some is left till morning, you must burn it. This is how you are to eat it. With your cloak tucked in your belt, with your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. Eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. On that same night I will pass through Egypt and strike down the firstborn of both people and animals, and will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am Yahweh. This blood will be a sign for you on the houses where you are, and when you see the blood, I will pass over you. No destructive plague will touch you when I strike Egypt." This meditation is called "The Lamb Has Overcome." This text we're reading today and throughout the next couple of days is the centerpiece of Jewish faith and its tradition. They've been doing it for 4,000 years. Think about that, for 4,000 years. And in slightly revised form, it also is the central observance of the Christian faith. In both cases, it involves the bloody death of an innocent victim. What? The bloody death of an innocent victim? Yes. Both the Jewish Passover and the Christian Eucharist commemorate a sacrificial death. In the one instance, it is the perfectly spotless lamb whose life was taken to set the Israelites free. In the other, it is the perfectly spotless God-man whose life was given to set all people free. In both cases, an innocent life is given on behalf of the guilty. Christians and Jews find this a meaningful act of worship, a reminder of God's rescuing love. But how does it look from the outside? Why should the innocent suffer for the guilty? Isn't sacrificial death a barbaric practice that should be abandoned in the face of modern sensibilities? And if, as is generally asserted, this is all done at the behest of God, who requires a blood sacrifice, shouldn't this vengeful God be rejected? After all, what kind of God is it whose wrath is only appeased if someone dies? These are worthy objections. They must be taken seriously. Is there a barbaric act at the root of the Judeo-Christian tradition? At first glance, it might seem so. But deeper reflection suggests otherwise and reveals, if we are patient, a rich vein of truth. These are stories about moral accountability and the consequences of evil. You see, for the larger issue at stake in the conquest between God and Pharaoh includes questions like these. What is to be done about the existence of evil in the world? Is there a moral law to which we are accountable? Are we morally responsible for our own deeds? Does it matter whether people behave rightly or wrongly? And if it does, what are the consequences for their behavior? There are many today who want morality to matter, but do not do a well-known act of terror. I won't go into the details here. The man who did it was caught, was tried, and was convicted. Suppose the judge had said to him, "If you're sorry for what you've done and you promise never to do it again, you may go free." People would have been horrified had that been the case. Would justice have been served in that scenario? Of course not. On the contrary, outraged at the injustice of letting a convicted murderer go free. Why? Because, and we seem to know this in our bones, there ought to be consequences for bad behavior. The worse the behavior, the greater the consequences. Mass murder, as in this instance, is an affront against humanity. It cannot go unpunished. Justice demands it. If we agree to this line of reasoning, and we surely must, it is perfectly sensible to see that humanity as a whole is racking up an overwhelming debt against itself and against the God to whom it is accountable. Justice demands it. If we accept that a guilty murderer must pay his debt, we are inconsistent if we maintain that a guilty humanity is not accountable for its actions. And if we think humanity is not guilty, then we're not watching the news or not paying attention to our own wayward hearts. After all, how often do we fail to obey the dictates of our own best intentions? Which brings to the fore this fundamental question: why is it that despite our best intentions, we consistently are unable to live by, quote, the better angels of our nature, close quote, as President Lincoln so eloquently stated in his first inauguration speech? Why do we find ourselves so often saying, doing, or thinking the very things we know are destructive and we know we shouldn't do? The scriptures tell us why. There is evil in this world. It was unleashed when our first parents chose to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Rather than trusting God to define good and bad for us, they determined to define it for themselves. As a result, then evil was uncorked in human hearts, spreading outward like the COVID-19 pandemic, into our relationships, our families, our tribes, our cultures, our civilizations, indeed, even into our beloved country, as we have seen in recent weeks. You see, evil left unchecked in human hearts must be excised, like cancer in the human body, or else it will destroy us and the world. So what is to be done about evil? What is to be done about humanity's rebellion and its self-destructive consequences? If we ignore it, will it go away? We know better than that. How, however, can God do away with evil without doing away with us? Passover is the answer. Passover reminds us that the choice to turn our backs on God, as Pharaoh did, as our first parents did, indeed, as we ourselves do, is a choice to bring death upon ourselves. Turning our backs on God as the giver of life is a choice for death. It is a death wish. In the day you eat of it, you shall surely die. Gee, the scriptures say to our first parents. I know it's a hard pill to swallow. We want God to wink at humanity's rebellion. But we do not believe parents should do the same when their children misbehave, or that teachers and coaches should let students and athletes run roughshod over school or team rules, or that murderers should be given a slap on the wrist. Do we seriously want to hold parents, coaches, and the courts to a higher standard than God? We cannot have it both ways. Moral laws require moral consequences. You see, God had given to Pharaoh 9 opportunities to comply with his demand that Israel be set free. Each time, Pharaoh refused and hardened his heart. How many more chances should God have given? If rivers of blood, infestations of frogs, gnats, darkness, boils, and you name it, didn't get his attention, what would have? Short of the dramatic things that happened on that fateful night when the destroyer came. Even then, mercy was available. The blood of an innocent lamb would have protected him. But of course, that is the point that makes us uncomfortable. Why should an innocent lamb suffer? Where's the justice in that? Indeed. However, were justice fully served, no one would have survived that auspicious night. God overlooked, that is, passed over, the guilt of all of humanity, not just Pharaoh and the Egyptians, when the slaughtered lamb's blood was obediently spread on their doorposts, and its innocent body was eaten by the family indoors. Barbaric? No. It was mercy. For God was intent on finding a means by which he could cultivate a loving relationship with his beloved humanity despite its rebelliousness. And the lamb, innocent though he was merely a symbol pointing to a future reality. For on a fateful Passover evening, some 1,400 years later, another group of Israelites would gather inside of a closed building. They would share the traditional cup and the bread in their Passover meal, but there would be no lamb. Why? Because later that evening, the true lamb would be sacrificed, the one towards which all the previous lambs had been pointing. Jesus, who had become God, living in the flesh, taking upon himself our own death so that he could give to us life. He was the one who would set us free from the sting of evil and the power of death. You see, it was not merely an innocent lamb that was being offered by guilty men before a holy God. No, this was the innocent lamb, God himself, voluntarily giving up his life on behalf of guilty men. God took personal responsibility for our rebellion. He took personal responsibility for our rebellion. He took upon himself the moral consequence for our moral misbehavior. God accepted our punishment so that we wouldn't have to. God had become one of us for the express purpose of sharing our guilt, so that in exchange he'd give us new life. He died, the just for the unjust, in order that justice could be served without destroying us. He died under the weight of evil, so that evil's power over humanity could be divested of its evil source. Was it barbaric? Absolutely not. It was the greatest act of love the world has ever known.
and love like mighty rivers, poured incessant from above. Heaven's peace and perfect justice, guilty world in love, grace and love like mighty rivers, poured incessant from above. Heaven's peace, perfect justice, kiss the guilty world in love. Heaven's peace and perfect justice, kiss the guilty world in love.
Amen.